I never believed in grand romantic gestures. You know the kind I mean, the ones you see in movies where someone shows up in the rain with a boombox or flies across the country for a single kiss. I always thought those were fantasies, the kind of thing that looked good on screen but never actually happened to real people like me. Real life was practical. Real life was text messages and making plans 2 weeks in advance and hoping someone would eventually feel the same way you did if you just waited long enough and played it cool. Then Marcus drove 30 miles on his day off just to say hello, and everything I thought I knew about romance completely fell apart. Let me back up. I need to tell you how we met, because that context matters. It was one of those beautiful autumn afternoons when the light hits everything just right and the whole world looks like it's been dipped in honey. I was at this farmer's market downtown, the kind of place where everyone's wearing flannel and carrying reusable bags and pretending they know the difference between heirloom tomatoes. I was there because my sister had dragged me along, insisting I needed to get out of my apartment more, that I was becoming a hermit at 28 years old. She wasn't wrong. After my last relationship ended 6 months earlier, I'd kind of retreated into myself. It wasn't even a bad breakup, really. Just one of those slow fades where you both realize you're more comfortable apart than together, and you're mature enough to admit it. But it still left me feeling hollow, like I'd forgotten how to connect with people on any level deeper than surface pleasantries. So there I was, standing in front of a booth selling artisanal honey, because apparently that's a thing now, when someone bumped into me from behind. I turned around ready to mumble an apology, even though it wasn't my fault, because that's just the kind of person I am. And I found myself looking into these incredibly warm brown eyes, the kind of eyes that crinkle at the corners when they smile, which he was doing, this apologetic but genuine smile that made my stomach do this weird flip I hadn't felt in years. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark curly hair that was just messy enough to look intentional, and he was wearing this faded band t-shirt under a denim jacket that had definitely seen better days. There was something immediately comfortable about him, like we'd known each other in another life, or something equally ridiculous that I would never normally think. "Sorry, man," he said, and his voice was deep and soft at the same time, if that makes any sense. I was trying to see what kind of honey they had and completely wasn't watching where I was going. "It's okay," I managed, suddenly very aware that I was staring. "The buckwheat honey is really good if you like a stronger flavor." I don't know why I said that. I'd never tried their buckwheat honey. I'd never tried any buckwheat honey, but he lit up like I'd just shared some profound wisdom. "Yeah, I've been wanting to try something different. I usually just grab whatever's on sale at the grocery store, but my roommate keeps telling me I need to expand my horizons." He paused, then extended his hand. "I'm Marcus." "David," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm and warm, and he held on just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Or maybe I was imagining that. I was probably imagining that. We ended up walking through the market together. I don't remember making a conscious decision to do it. It just happened naturally, like water finding its level. We talked about honey, and then about the ridiculous price of organic vegetables, and then about the band on his t-shirt, which I pretended to know more about than I actually did. He was easy to talk to in a way that felt rare and precious. There were no awkward silences, no desperate grasping for topics. The conversation just flowed. My sister found me an hour later, giving me this knowing look that made me want to disappear into the ground. Marcus was telling me about his job as a graphic designer, and I was genuinely interested, which never happened when people described their jobs. Usually, I just nodded politely and waited for the conversation to move on. "I should probably go," I said reluctantly when my sister made it clear she was ready to leave. "But this was really nice." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, maybe? Or was I projecting? Hey, could I get your number? Maybe we could grab coffee sometime. I gave him my number, trying not to seem too eager, trying to maintain some semblance of cool, even though inside I was 17 years old again and experiencing my first crush. We said goodbye, and I walked away feeling like I was floating 6 inches off the ground. My sister didn't say anything until we got to her car, and then she just looked at me and said, "He's cute." "Shut up," I replied, but I was smiling. Marcus texted me that night. Not immediately, which I appreciated, because there's something desperate about someone reaching out within an hour of meeting you. But not so late that I'd started to think he wasn't going to contact me at all. He texted me at 8:30, just as I was settling in to watch something mindless on Netflix. "Hey, it's Marcus from the Honey Booth. Just wanted to make sure you got home okay, and also to say I bought the buckwheat honey, and you were right, it's amazing." I read that message probably 15 times, analyzing every word like it was ancient scripture. The fact that he'd bought the honey felt significant somehow, like he'd been thinking about our conversation, like it had mattered to him too. We texted back and forth for the rest of the evening, and then every day after that. Long, rambling conversations about everything and nothing. I learned that he was originally from Portland, that he'd moved here 3 years ago for a job opportunity that hadn't quite worked out, but he'd stayed anyway because he'd fallen in love with the city. I learned that he was terrible at cooking but made excellent cocktails, that he had a younger brother he was close to, that he'd come out when he was 21, and his family had been mostly supportive, except for one uncle who no longer spoke to him. I told him things I hadn't told anyone in years, about my job as a high school English teacher and how exhausting but rewarding it was, about my parents who lived 2 states away and called every Sunday without fail, about how I'd known I was gay since I was 14 but hadn't told anyone until college, and how that period of hiding had left scars I was still working through. 2 weeks after we met, we finally went on that coffee date, except it turned into dinner because we talked through the afternoon, and then it turned into drinks because neither of us wanted the evening to end. We sat in this dimly lit bar with exposed brick walls and vintage concert posters, and somewhere between the second and third round, our knees touched under the table and neither of us moved away. "I really like talking to you," Marcus said at one point, and there was this vulnerability in his voice that made my chest tight. "I really like talking to you too," I said, and it felt like the most honest thing I'd said in months. We started seeing each other regularly after that, not officially dating because neither of us had brought up that conversation yet, but definitely more than friends. We'd meet for lunch when our schedules aligned. We'd text constantly throughout the day, sharing stupid memes and random observations. He started showing up at the coffee shop near my school on my free periods, claiming he just happened to be in the neighborhood, even though I knew his office was nowhere nearby. The thing was, I was falling for him, slowly at first, and then all at once, like that quote from that book everyone reads in high school, and I was terrified, because I couldn't tell if he felt the same way. He was affectionate, sure. He'd touch my arm when he laughed, lean close when we were looking at something on his phone together, but he never made a move beyond that, never tried to kiss me, never brought up the possibility of us being something more than whatever we currently were. I convinced myself he just wanted to be friends, that I was reading too much into every interaction, seeing signs that weren't there because I wanted them to be. My therapist, who I'd started seeing again after the breakup, kept gently suggesting that maybe I should just ask him directly how he felt, but I couldn't. The fear of rejection was too strong, and at least in this ambiguous space, I still had hope. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Wednesday, which is relevant because Wednesday was Marcus's day off. He worked Tuesday through Saturday at his design firm, which meant Wednesdays he usually slept in and then spent the day doing errands or working on personal projects. He'd told me about his schedule early on, and I'd filed the information away without really thinking about why I was memorizing his routine. I was having a terrible day. One of those days where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I'd woken up late because my alarm hadn't gone off, rushed to school without breakfast, and then discovered that the lesson plan I'd spent hours preparing the night before wasn't going to work because the projector was broken and IT couldn't fix it until next week. My third period class had been particularly difficult, with two students getting into an argument that I'd had to mediate, and by lunch I was ready to fake a family emergency and go home. I was sitting in my classroom during my planning period, stress-eating a granola bar and seriously considering whether teaching was really my calling, when my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Hey, are you at school right now?" I frowned at the message, confused about why he was asking. "Yeah, until 3:30. Why?" "What room number?" I told him, still not understanding what was happening. He just sent back a smiley face emoji, which wasn't helpful at all. 10 minutes later, there was a knock on my classroom door. I looked up from the essays I was supposed to be grading but was really just staring at blankly, and there was Marcus, standing in the doorway with 2 coffee cups and a paper bag that I could smell from across the room. I just stared at him for a moment, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. "What are you doing here?" He walked in, looking slightly sheepish but pleased with himself. "You sounded stressed in your texts this morning, so I thought I'd bring you lunch. I hope that's okay." I probably should have asked first, but I wanted it to be a surprise. "You drove 30 miles to bring me lunch?" "And coffee," he added, setting everything down on my desk. "The good coffee from that place you like, not the cafeteria stuff you say tastes like regret." I'd mentioned that once, weeks ago, in passing. The fact that he remembered felt impossibly significant. "Hey, Marcus, it's your day off." My voice came out weird, kind of thick and emotional in a way I hadn't expected. He shrugged, pulling up a student desk and sitting down across from me. "Yeah, and I wanted to spend part of it making sure you ate something other than a granola bar, which I'm guessing is what you were planning based on the wrapper I can see in your trash can." "You drove 30 miles, I repeated, because I couldn't seem to get past that fact. 30 miles. In the middle of the day, on his day off, just to bring me coffee and a sandwich. "David." He said my name softly, and when I looked up at him, there was something in his eyes that made my heart stop. "It's not that far, and even if it was, you're worth it." The classroom suddenly felt very small and very quiet. Somewhere in the building a bell rang, and I could hear the distant sounds of students in the hallway, but it all felt very far away. All I could focus on was Marcus, sitting in a desk that was too small for him, looking at me like I was something precious. "I don't understand," I said, even though I was starting to. "I think you do." He reached across the desk and took my hand, lacing our fingers together. His palm was warm against mine. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for weeks now. I kept waiting for the perfect moment, but then I realized I was just being a coward. So here it is, in your classroom in the middle of your workday, which is probably the least romantic setting possible, but I can't wait anymore. I have feelings for you, David. Real feelings, the kind that make me drive 30 miles just to see you smile." I couldn't breathe, or maybe I was breathing too much. Everything felt heightened and surreal, like I'd slipped into an alternate universe where the things I wanted actually happened. "You have feelings for me," I said stupidly. "Yeah?" He laughed, but it was nervous. I thought I was being pretty obvious about it, but apparently I needed to be more direct. "I like you a lot. I think about you constantly. I engineer excuses to see you. I memorize the things you say because they matter to me, and I really, really want to kiss you, if that's something you'd be okay with." "I thought you just wanted to be friends," I admitted, feeling stupid. I've been trying so hard not to read too much into things. Friends. He shook his head, smiling. David, friends don't drive 30 miles to deliver lunch. Friends don't spend hours crafting the perfect text message. Friends don't lie awake at night thinking about the way someone laughs. You do that? My voice was barely a whisper, all the time. I stood up, still holding his hand, pulling him up with me. He was taller than me, which meant I had to tilt my head back slightly to look at him properly. This close, I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could count the freckles scattered across his nose. I have feelings for you too, I said. I have for weeks, maybe since the farmer's market. I don't know. I just know that you make me feel things I didn't think I could feel anymore. Yeah? His free hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. Yeah. Can I kiss you now? He asked. Because I've been thinking about it for approximately 6 weeks, and I'm not sure I can wait any longer. I didn't answer with words. I just closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his. It was soft at first, tentative, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then his arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer, and I felt something in my chest crack open, all the feelings I'd been holding back flooding out at once. He tasted like coffee and possibility. His lips were soft and sure, moving against mine with a confidence that made my knees weak. I'd been kissed before plenty of times, but never like this. Never with this sense of rightness, like all the pieces of my life had suddenly clicked into place. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. Marcus rested his forehead against mine, and I could feel him smiling. That was worth the drive, he murmured. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months, maybe years. You're ridiculous. You like it. I really do. We didn't have much time. My next class started in 20 minutes, and I needed to pull myself together before facing a room full of teenagers who would definitely notice if their teacher looked completely dazed. But we made the most of it, stealing kisses between bites of the sandwich he'd brought, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for a real date that weekend. When he finally left, promising to text me when he got home, I felt like a completely different person than I had been an hour earlier. The stress of the day hadn't disappeared exactly, but it felt manageable now. Everything felt manageable. That was 8 months ago. Marcus and I have been officially together since that day, and I still can't quite believe how lucky I am. We've had our challenges, sure. Learning to navigate a relationship is never simple, and we both carry our own baggage from past experiences, but we work through it together with honesty and patience and a lot of communication. He still does things that make my heart stop. Last month, he surprised me with tickets to see my favorite band, even though he's not particularly into their music. He just wanted to see me happy. 2 weeks ago, I had the flu, and he showed up at my apartment with soup and medicine and spent the whole weekend taking care of me, even though I looked and felt disgusting. But I think about that Wednesday more than anything else. The day he drove 30 miles just to say hello, just to make sure I was okay, just because he couldn't stand the thought of me having a bad day if he could do something about it. That's when I knew this was real. That's when I understood what people meant when they talked about grand romantic gestures, because it's not about the boombox in the rain or the cross-country flight. It's about someone seeing you struggling and deciding that your happiness matters more than their convenience. It's about someone choosing you, actively and intentionally, over and over again. It's about 30 miles feeling like nothing when the person waiting at the end is everything. I never believed in grand romantic gestures, but Marcus taught me that sometimes the grandest gesture is just showing up, being present, caring enough to make the effort, even when it's not convenient, even when it's not expected. That's the real romance. That's the thing that lasts. He's coming over tonight. It's his day off again, and we're planning to cook dinner together, which really means I'll cook while he keeps me company and occasionally stirs things when I ask him to. It's ordinary and domestic and exactly what I want. Sometimes I think about that version of me sitting in the classroom, stressed and overwhelmed, with no idea that everything was about to change. I want to tell him that it gets better, that the person worth having is the one who shows up. That love, real love, isn't about playing it cool or waiting for the perfect moment. It's about someone looking at you and deciding you're worth 30 miles, worth the effort, worth everything. Marcus texted me a few minutes ago asking if I needed anything from the store. I told him just to bring himself, because that's all I've ever really needed. Him, showing up, choosing me, making me believe in things I thought only existed in movies. Grand romantic gestures, it turns out, are real. They just look different than I expected. They look like coffee cups and paper bags. They look like someone remembering the small things you say. They look like 30 miles disappearing because the person at the end of the drive is home. That's what Marcus is to me now, home. And every day, in 100 small ways, he drives those 30 miles all over again. And I do the same for him, because that's what love is. Showing up, being present, making the effort, choosing each other over and over, even when it's not convenient, especially when it's not convenient. I never believed in grand romantic gestures, but now I understand. The grandest gesture of all is simply caring enough to try. And Marcus, with his warm eyes and his terrible cooking and his willingness to drive 30 miles just to say hello, taught me that. I'm grateful for that Wednesday, for the broken projector and the difficult class and the stress that made me text him in the first place, because it led to him showing up, and him showing up led to everything else. The kiss, the relationship, the love, all of it started with someone caring enough to make the drive. So here's what I want you to know. If you're listening to this and wondering if you're worth it, you are. You're worth the drive. You're worth the effort. And someday, someone is going to show up for you in whatever way makes sense for your story. And you're going to understand what I understand now. Love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about someone looking at the distance between where they are and where you are and deciding it's not too far. It's never too far, not when it's you. Marcus drove 30 miles on his day off just to say hello, and in doing so, he said everything.